The age at which someone comes out and tells somebody that they're gay has changed drastically over the years. Generation X typically came out at the age of 24, 25, while millennials came out around the age of 18. So we're seeing, I feel like, more of an acceptance overall, or at least people are more willing to share their truth at an earlier age. And I think that's a good sign. My question to you is, what percentage of parents do you think, and I know this is just a guess, had an inkling that their child might be gay and then actually turned out to be gay?
I think a lot. And I think obviously those parents fall into two buckets. The parents who know and are like, okay, when they'll tell me in their time, and the parents who may suspect and are deeply uncomfortable with it. So it creates a tension in the family and probably even more pain and hurt for the child who's coming out. So, but I think a pretty large proportion, because again, it may come out in a variety of ways, ranging from gender non-conforming behavior to whom they're spending time with. It's going to sneak out in different ways, and I think a parent with eyes open will be aware, but I think many parents suspect.
What are some of the classic signs that could indicate somebody might be not heterosexual?
I almost want to pitch that one back to you and sort of your process of doing it, because there are obviously, I don't think there's anything set here. I think there's a danger of like, well, if this is happening, then that, because you may very well have a child, a boy engaging in gender non-conforming behavior, I should say, playing with a sister who has dolls, or being engaged in that, and he is in fact cisgender, heterosexual, so it just maybe that's his preferred sibling kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So, but you may look for gender non-conforming play, gender non-conforming dress, but even that might be also indicative that the child is trans and not gay. It may be choices of peers. It may be storytelling that they engage in. It may be identification with peers, with parents, with siblings. It could be the kinds of activities they may want to choose to do. But like I said, even as I say that, there are so many lesbian and gay kids who, I just feel like that I think the fact is, maybe the bigger takeaway is, you don't know. There is no tell.
Yes.
And I think that it's all about, for a parent, creating a loving, comfortable home where a child can come out, whenever they're ready, and not try to pick it out of clues.
Yes, yeah. And I shared a story before we started filming. When I was probably maybe 5, I asked my mom for a doll. I really wanted to play with this doll because it had this diamond on her stomach. And I was like, I love that. I was just like, I gotta get that. And my mom, very nice, she's like, here's your doll. And then my dad later said, so do you, or like, what's going on? Like, you want a doll? And I go, well, I want to be a girl. And he goes, oh. Now, a lot of people would hear that and go, oh, well, you better, buy this boy a dress because he wants to be a girl. And I think for me, it was just a passing moment. I think the next day I was probably over it. But there is, to your point, everything a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old says is not set in stone.
And that's what it is. I remember actually my daughters had a very gender non-conforming peer, and I think now he's just looks like a regular teenage boy, and so it's not I think though, for that child to feel safe with that exploration, no different when and again, as a psychologist with kids, I was like, I'm going to buy my child a truck and see how it works out. And for one child, the truck became a crib for her baby, and the other one, the truck became a crayon holder. Neither of them was really, but did I think, well, I've definitely got heterosexual, cisgender daughters? No, I'm like, the truck wasn't winning in this house. But, it is, again, I think that risk becomes, we're trying to sort of pin it on what feels right. But I think that it's more than anything is let the child be the child, and honestly give them a variety of things to play with, and give them a variety of experiences to have, and don't try to steer that ship in such a heavy-handed way. I mean, I think what makes me most sad is if a child is experimenting with storytelling and saying, oh, I think that the 2 boys are going to get married, and the parent to say something really insensitive, like, well, boys don't get married. Like, that's the part that makes my heart so heavy, because that's the story the child is telling. Let them tell the stories that they experience and feel. And that's where I think that's what's more important. That I put this onus on the parents. Let the child play as the child will.
Let's first talk about parents who would have no problem if their child was gay or straight. They're like, it's fine. I just want to know what to do to give them that space to feel comfortable. What are some things that they can do?
Love them unconditionally.
Yes.
Have that conversation with them. Don't say insensitive things.
Well, what is that conversation with them? What do you mean by that?
It may be, for example, here's one of the biggest concerns I see is that when we talk about sexual orientation, we make it too much about sex. This isn't about sex. Like, for a gay man, for a lesbian woman, for a bisexual man or woman, it's not all about sex. Who's doing what to whom. This is about attraction. This is about intimacy. This is about partnership. That's what it's about. And so I think that it really cheapens the conversation when it's made just about sex, because I think you lose what this really is for a human being. It's about human relationships. And I think that one thing I would say is don't make this conversation about sex. That may be your curiosity, then you need to go read what you need to read. Your child is not your child, whether it's your teenage child, adult child, is not your sex ed teacher.
Yes.
Like, figure this out yourself.
Yeah.
And basically just say, I love you. Like, I don't know that the conversation should be much more complicated than that. Yeah. Listen, some people may want to give their parents a history. I've known since this age, I was anxious to tell you. There may be religious reasons they were anxious, cultural reasons, that the parent hear them, and I love you. The child may not want to share all the story. They say, listen, I am gay. And many times what spurs that on is having a partner that they want their parents to meet. Love your child. Like, this isn't rocket science.
Right.
In some ways I want to, but I also understand, even as I say that, cultural, religious, all these other barriers that families may bring in, that they do believe they love their child. They're just having difficulty integrating that element in. It's something that they didn't expect and that they culturally don't even have the space in their brain to make sense of. I don't think it is the child's responsibility, no matter what age that child comes out, to be the person to have to educate their parents.
I get that.
I would say that these parents could go speak to someone, a professional, read, but I think that that's a really tough onus to put on someone who's probably really worked hard to even get to this point of sharing this with their parents.
Now, my dad tells me that when I was 3, he knew I was gay. And he told my mother, and my mother looked at him and said, "You are an idiot. You cannot know at 3 years old that this kid is gay." And then I told my mother when I was probably 7 that I didn't use the word gay, but I told her what was going on. And she said, "Well, you don't know." And I said, "Okay, guess I don't know." Then I told my dad when I was probably 10 or 12 or something. And he goes, "Okay." And then he read all these books about it to have a conversation. Then he approached me a few years later and said, "Do you still feel that way?" I went back in the closet and said, "Oh my gosh, no, that was a mistake. I was confused, blah, blah." And then I came out to him again when I was probably 18 or 19. And then that has been the end of it. But one thing that I felt comfortable doing, clearly by the story, was having those conversations with my parents, even at a very, very early age. And I think especially parents can make room for that. For heterosexual people out there, imagine growing up and only seeing gay movies and only seeing lesbian advertising and only hearing about how terrible heterosexuality was and why would a man and a woman cohabitate. That is disgusting and ridiculous. Men should be with men and women should be with men. Picture hearing that your whole life. So you as a parent can be that space to show another side. And it's as easy as saying, "Oh, well, yeah, I heard Mark got a new boyfriend. That's great for Mark." And just hearing that and going, "Oh, so Mark can have a boyfriend. That means I can have a boyfriend." I think those little things really open up that conversation for when that child can come in and come out.
It's a big conversation, though, Kyle. It's a big conversation. It's really taking on those issues, and this is where we call upon larger societal structures, religious communities, community leaders, to create welcoming and inclusive communities, pushing back on these ridiculous and hurtful stigmas and biases, and making this an acceptable part of the discourse. Listen, many times movies and television gets it wrong, but sometimes they get it right. Like, we're seeing more and more healthy depictions of same-sex relationships, trans people, like, and it's not, it used to be very campy, and it used to be very mocking and
it's very
and
Jack from Will and
ridiculous.
Grace over and over and over again.
Yes, but now you're saying like it's like I was just recently watching a series, and it's just a beautiful, elegant, lovely relationship evolving between two men, and they kiss each other often, and I'm like, this is beautiful. Like, I love this TV show because there's nothing, you didn't feel like, ooh, it didn't feel prurient, or it was just, it felt good. And I think that that's what we need to be creating the world at large, because like I said, these biases, they accompany people as a function of a lot of things, but that's where the pushback needs to come in. And I think that, again, societal structures, education, religious communities, like really addressing this bias.
So let's talk about the parents who are involved in these religious communities. I get it. You believe in your religion. I respect that. And part of your religion says that this is going to send your child into an eternal life of hell and torture. So how does a parent who's watching this series going, I want to be supportive, but my belief system has me fearing for my child's life?
Right.
What's the solution there?
There's a lot of different ways. I mean, family therapy is one approach, but with a therapist who really knows this literature. This is not for, this is for somebody who knows their game here, that's really can work with a family, have this conversation. Because you got to remember, Kyle, in that family, that son or daughter who's coming out, they themselves have internalized a lot of this religious conversation too. So they may be having to make a decision. Do I need to leave the faith I grew up in or the culture I grew up in to be able to move into my adult life? That's a loss. Don't just assume everyone's squared off as a rebel and saying, great, to heck with you, I'm out of here. This is a real loss. And so family therapy could be a great place to start, to have a conversation about what this really means to them. How can they maintain that link into their faith, but make place for their child? And these are not easy conversations.
No.
Like, it has to be done gradually, and it doesn't always, families don't always stay together after these kinds of transitions.
I think one thing people can do, if they're already watching this series, there's a part of them that goes, look, I want to learn. And that's amazing. And one thing my dad did, which I really respect him, is he treated it like any other unknown thing in his life. He went and got educated. He goes, I'm not a gay man. I apparently have a gay son. What do I do? So he reached out to people who he knew were gay. He read books about parenting gay kids. And so he educated himself. And I think that step alone is something people don't realize they can do. Even if you think it's bad and wrong, still go get educated on it, because it's what's happening.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Absolutely.
Any final thoughts about supporting a teen and creating that space for them if we think they could be gay?
Well, keep in mind too that LGBTQ teens are significantly more likely to experience violence and bullying and trauma. And so I also think that, you want to keep an eye on your child no matter what. I don't care what your child's gender, identity, sexual orientation is. We obviously want to keep our child safe and give them a safe space if they're experiencing any of that. But that's also more likely to happen there, which is be aware, get your child mental health services, because that could become a really important space. If your child says they are struggling, get them mental health services with somebody who gets this. And with somebody who gets this piece is really, really important. So they have that safe space to explore all of that. And that, that this could, if people, depending on the person, but really should be the easiest conversation in the world, love your child. The rest will come naturally. That's really all your child wants, is to be loved. And, that, I mean, you would know this better than I, because you've experienced this, as and many of your friends have experienced this, that the head of steam going to that moment when you finally do sit with your parents. For some people, that's an anguishing decision, and how to approach it. And the suicidal thoughts, suicidal feelings, how am I going to get through this? What's going to happen? Lots of anxiety, lots of fear. I would really like to live in a world where that's not the case. That just becomes part of the process of growing up.
And you just reminded me of something that's, I think, important to note. For parents out there, it's very likely that your teen will come out to their peers before they come out to you. They may feel more comfortable in that space. They may meet somebody at school who is also gay. So they may be having this cathartic experience over here before they come to you. And it doesn't mean they don't love you or they don't trust you. It just means that's the way they wanted to do it.
But I also think some parents get blindsided by a gay teen may go to the prom with a girl.
Yep. For 4 years straight. How about that?
So, and then when that boy or girl comes out, they'll say, but you went to the prom with the boy or girl or boy. And, you know, parents need to be careful not to gaslight their kids and say, imagine what your child was going through, probably still trying to make the shoe fit
Sneaky, sneaky.
Yeah, sneaky, but also protective.
Oh, I know.
You know?
My whole life from the age of probably 13 to 19 was proving to people that I was straight.
Yep.
That was my number one goal every day.
That's
hard.
hard.
I gotta continue. I gotta make sure my teachers know, my coaches know, my friends know, my parents know, my brother knows. I gotta make sure. And so anytime they could see me with a girl, go to prom with it, those were great opportunities to continue the myth and continue the lie. And so, yeah, I was trying to be straight for the longest time.
Listen, you know, I'm sure you know too, people who marry. They have families.
I know.
You know, and some of them may be bisexual, some may be gay, and having to, you know, come to understanding and recognition and ownership of their sexual orientation. So you can imagine how much questioning takes place for a very, very long time. Yeah. So I think that is really and people do question. Yeah. People do question, and we are now in a world where we're creating space for questioning. Yeah. That this isn't like you don't have to buy into something like now you're locked in. Like there's space to do that, and I want young people to remember that there is space to do that questioning, and it's fine. Yeah. It's fine.
When people see me on MedCircle, they ask, "So are you an actor?" And I go, no, but I played a straight man for 19 years. Ba-dum-bum. On that awful joke, we'll move on to our next session, supporter strategies for when that loved one decides to come out of the closet.